Iduna, I thought I might find you out here, the king said one day. We just received word that Lady Rapunzel is about to be married. They are an important trading partner, her kingdom is, with us. It would be terribly wrong of us not to go, but I did want to talk to you. King Agnarr was pretty much the type of guy who was very kind and compassionate. He had lived his whole life in splendor and luxury. He was royal blood through and through. Occasionally he would go hunting with his hounds. He was an able-bodied minister of the kingdom, a terrific one as a matter of fact. But he and Queen Iduna, who were deeply in love with one another, had a terrible secret. Their daughter Elsa had been exhibiting magical powers. A few years previously, she had even gone so far as having her powers injure Anna, their youngest daughter. This was something that had caused the kingdom to panic. They had canceled all their trips. They didn't go anywhere. They were trying to deal with Elsa. Everything around the clock was about sequestering and keeping Elsa's magic from growing and destroying everyone and killing or hurting other people. To the point that they kept Anna and Elsa apart out of fear that Anna would fall prey to Elsa's inability to control her powers, if that's a polite way to put it. But now it was time to set sail. Offending and not attending to the wedding would have put Arundel in a situation in which would be untenable. To show up and publicly not visit one of your trading partners, well, that was very close to disrespect. As much as they hated it, as much as they didn't want to go, they had to leave. They knew that their servants and that basically all the correspondence had been taken care of. The king had worked around the clock, and the queen had made some charitable visits out beyond the walls. So they knew at the end of the day that their kingdom would be fine for 2 weeks, and any problems that could occur should be handled. But they also knew, without a shadow of doubt, that even with that said, there was no guarantee that Elsa could be controlled. They decided that possibly they would look out for any type of medicine or magic or anything that they could get their hands on to try and control Elsa's powers while they were at sea. This was a stretch, and it was going to be a difficult one. Iduna protested. Agnarr, do we have to go? It just seems like this trip, I could go. You could stay here with Elsa, and we could come up with an excuse that... No. Their kingdom has been through a lot recently, too. We must go. We must both make an appearance. They are so viable. If they get upset and they stop trading with us, it will hurt the entire kingdom and lead to instability. You know what instability would do, right? Iduna, as she so often did, acquiesced to her husband. He was the king, and he was a terrific administrator. He had made so many good decisions. She knew that there was a softness in him that was certainly worrisome, or could be under the wrong circumstances. He was oftentimes hasty and could be petulant and could be very decisive and not listen. But she loved the man. He was pretty good at doing things. But that was within the context of being a king. She had her doubts about how he had handled Elsa's powers before. It was also taking quite a bit of toll on Anna. She had even witnessed them playing a couple times, and she had listened with heartbreak as Anna would sing at Elsa's door. Anna didn't even know that her mom was watching. Iduna would go and close the door quickly, remarking about the talent that Anna seemed to possess in music. But it was time to go. They boarded the ship over Elsa's protests. She was begging them. The girl was almost in tears. Once again, Agnarr was pretty much not responsive to his daughter's tears. What Agnar's opinion was, and it was something that you could hardly blame him for, was that they had been on any royal visits. This was quite a tremendous toll. Anyone who had been a caretaker would understand what type of toll it is to suddenly have your entire social life and world upended because you were caretaking for someone. She could hardly blame her husband for wanting to get out and actually be out in the world a little bit. And she thought about this as an opportunity for herself to do some good. Her relationship with her husband had been a little strained, and maybe they could reconnect and think of it as a little bit of a holiday, away from the responsibilities that awaited them when they come home. The ship that they got on was beautiful. It really was a floating palace at sea. It had all the luxuries and the gifts and the things that you would expect out of a modern ocean liner of its time. In fact, Anna had once remarked that it almost felt like home. Sometimes Anna would ask to go sleep on the boat. That girl, she could be a handful. Out at sea, the waters and the waves were just peaceful. It was like floating on a lake. And it was then that they saw something peculiar floating. No one could quite make what it was. This object, it looked kind of like a clamshell. The sun beating down was reflecting off of it, and it seemed like a diamond in the ocean. King Agnarr and Queen Iduna were summoned to the port bow, to the starboard side, in which this object was floating along. They looked over, and they saw it. Iduna was breathless. It looked so beautiful. King Agnarr demanded the ship, the sailors, and the people of the crew to get a big fishing net and to quickly bring that aboard. Now, Iduna didn't want to go that far. She knew a little bit about magic. Her family had been a little bit steeped of it. She even had fears that she had worked hard to conceal from the king, that really Elsa had inherited her family's particular strain of magic ability. She didn't like that they were going to go and fish for a magical item potentially, or some sort of item in the ocean that had an unusual light to it. No, dear. This is beautiful. Elsa and Anna will love it. They pulled it out and presented it. As Agnarr presented it to Queen Iduna, he saw something very interesting. The figures in there were like nothing that had ever been seen above land before. It must have been done by somebody somewhere with an impeccable craft ability, because the two characters in this music box were it looked like a big burly man who had fish tails, some sort of fish tail. He had heard that they were called mermen. Agnarr had studied them, but he had considered them fantasy. Never had he seen mermen before. Iduna looked at the woman who was absolutely beautiful. And the merman and the mermaid looked like they were in love. And the music was the most beautiful music that one could hear. It was sad, though. There was a hint of sadness to this. Iduna and her husband Agnarr shared a sweet moment, because the music box seemed to let them know that despite all the bad that had happened and Elsa's powers, that love still had a wonderful opportunity. That they loved each other, that they were a family, and that they had faced it. The royal family had faced this problem. That they were going to find a way to help Elsa, and they were going to restore their life to the uninterrupted royalty that had been before. But the waves had a different course for them. A storm so vicious raised out of the water. It was sort of like that perfect storm that you would see in a bad Matt Damon movie. Or was it Matt Damon? Bad fuck. Anyways, it was that movie. The storm came out and engulfed the ship, bashing it to and fro. It was an unreal storm that just seemed to have appeared out of nowhere. It was, in every sense, a perfect storm. The sailors, the brave sailors that were on that ship, they did everything they could to keep the king and queen safe, preparing them as best as possible as water came crashing over. Life jackets were deployed. Even a small little rinky-dink boat, which was very rare for its time, was done, but that soon crashed against the rocks. Agnarr and Iduna were preparing to accept their fate to go down with this ship. It was at that point Iduna woke up and she was startled. She didn't know how long she was asleep, but she was in kind of a dense, moggy mush of thickets and seaweed and different sea algae. And there she was, half awake, definitely with a pretty nasty sunburn, and starving. She didn't know how long she had been out for. She rose to her feet and looked around. She started straggling. Where was she? Who was she? She almost felt. But then it came to her pretty quickly. I am Iduna. I am Queen of Arendelle. She wandered across the beach. The island looked exotic. It looked like paradise in some ways. And in other ways, it was completely foreign to her. What was she going to do? All the sailors, did they die? What happened to them? Her husband, after all, what happened to him? Was Agnarr dead? How was she going to get off this island? How was she going to feed herself? As these thoughts were coming to her mind, and the sun was beginning to set on the island, this terror had gripped her. She was not made to survive out in the wild, after all. But it was then that she saw a small little campfire and a face that she recognized as she came within distance. It was Agnarr. It was Agnarr eating what appeared to be some fish he had apparently caught. Iduna didn't pester him too much about coming to look for her. He said he had woken up a few hours earlier and he had scoured the island but did not find her. They somewhat laughed and somewhat cried over the fact that he didn't see her because Iduna was stuck in a swampy area and would have been invisible to the eye. That night, the two of them dreamt underneath the stars. They thought this was just going to be a momentary hiccup. We'll be back. We will figure out a way to get back, and maybe we can get to Rapunzel's wedding. It would be wonderful. And we'll figure out a way to get home. But that night turned into many, many nights. And it became incredibly clear that there was no one coming. Their route, or whatever route that they had taken, must have been well off the beaten path of normal trade routes. They were completely lucky to be alive, by all measure. But it didn't mean that they were going to get picked up anytime soon. Night after night after night after night, they struggled with it. Agnarr struggled with being on this island. This was a man of privilege, of wealth. He was a king who had servants and who had correspondence to write. He had an empire to overlook. He had a trading partner that he had to apologize to for missing their wedding. Put plain, this was a nightmare scenario for him. But most of all, despite his luck with fish, this was a man who was not in any way an outdoorsman, and he was not used to being left at sea. Iduna had a different type of situation. Iduna didn't know anything about the sea either, but day by day she learned a little bit more about the island. She went out of her way to see different animals. As they explored more of the island, they saw that there was a rich diversity of population on the island. There was apes and jaguars and tigers. There was